Hello, welcome to the next in our Developing Faith with Hebrews series. And today we're looking at Hebrews 6, verses 13 to 20. So, Steve last week unpacked end of chapter 5 and into the start of chapter 6 and looked at this idea of the author really encouraging the readers to not walk away from their faith in Jesus, to keep their eyes fixed on him, knowing that their salvation is dependent on Jesus, on him coming, on him dying for us. And so in that, the writer is starting to say you've got to have a certainty in this, that actually living this way, you have a hope, you have a certainty in who God is, in who Jesus is, and to just keep walking that journey of faith. So we then pick it up, verse 13, and I think it's really interesting, isn't it? You know, people will say to us, just keep going, just keep doing this, just, whatever the end of that line is, when we need some help and some encouragement. But sometimes we need something more than just someone telling us to do something or not do something. We need an example. And I really think the author gets this, because in verse 13, the author basically has said all that I've just summarized that Stephen packed last week. And then he says, but look at Abraham. Look at this example of a guy who was promised so much by God that he would have many descendants. And when God made that promise to Abraham, it was at a time where him and his wife Sarah had no children. They were older in life, in age. The thought even of them having children at the age they were at when God made that promise was a bit, really, God? How on earth is this going to happen? How is that promise going to be fulfilled? And yet we see, as we look at Abraham's life, that he sees that promise is in part fulfilled, in that he has children, they have children, his descendants are starting to grow. And as we have that wonderful thing of hindsight, we can look back, we can see what happened in Abraham's life after, and what happened in his family, and see that God's promise was fulfilled, probably immeasurably more than Abraham had ever imagined that promise would mean whilst he was alive. He was able to see that God's promise to him was fulfilled, and even more fulfilled after he died, in terms of how God showed his promises are true. The author is using this example to get us to see that whatever we are waiting on for God to fulfill, whatever the promises are that God has made to us, whatever we're needing to see God step in on, and we're asking him to show his faithfulness to us on, he will fulfill that promise. He will fulfill it, maybe not in exactly the way we see it should be fulfilled. He may fulfill it in a completely different way, in a way that we don't perhaps fully get or fully understand. But what we can be certain of is that our hope is in him, and he will do as he says he will. In verse 15, in the NIV, it picks up on this idea that Abraham waited patiently. He waited for God's promises to happen. And I think that is a massive challenge to us, a massive challenge of, are we waiting patiently? Are we waiting at all, let alone that word patient that is put in there by the author? Waiting patiently doesn't mean we just sit back and go, okay, God, I'm going to wait till you do whatever you're going to do. Waiting with God means we're expectant that he's going to act, expectant that he's going to do something, expectant on his promises to us, and that we're active in speaking with him, in talking with him on this. Waiting patiently doesn't mean we just sit there passively, but we are involved in God, waiting, knowing that he's going to act in his time when it's right for us, not on our timing or being dependent on our timing. And then the author spends a bit of time looking at this idea of swearing oaths. in an idea of that being something that will make things happen or believe things will happen. And when we're showing someone that they can really trust in us and believe what we're going to say is something we're going to do, we might use this idea of swearing an oath on something. It's a human way of being. It's showing there's an extra level of belief, but it also shows our human frailty, our weakness, that we have to use those kind of words and do that kind of thing in order to get someone to believe us, and in order for us to show that we won't let someone down. Yet even I'm sure many of you, on hearing this and reading these words in the Bible, will know that people have sworn an oath or said something, and then they have let us down. They've still not done as they said they would. And what the author's trying to say is that the only person God can swear on is himself. And the amazing thing in that is not only can God say, well, I'm going to do this, he always will. We can say that and swear by something and say, I promise, my oath is that I will do this. But we're human, we will let people down, and we won't always be able to deliver even after that kind of promise. The author's not encouraging us to do this or to take on this practice of swearing or giving an oath on something. But what he's trying to get us to see is that putting our faith and our trust in people, yes, at times people will do as they say, but people will let us down, and swearing on people or things won't actually get us anywhere. Only God will never let us down. And there's some great language in these verses of how God isn't changing, that his promises cannot be lies. The NIV puts it as, it is impossible for God to lie. Wow, I love that. What a hope, what a promise we have in the truth of that verse. Our hope in God is an anchor for our souls, firm and secure. Again, what a promise. Our hope in God is an anchor, secure, firm, never letting us down. And not just an anchor for us physically, but an anchor for our souls, for our innermost being. That's what the certainty is that we can have in God. Our hope and our security comes from who Jesus is and what he did for us. And the NIV again puts this and describes this as Jesus being our forerunner. I love that. Other language in this part suggests our hope can be a refuge. It talks on the idea of we flee or we've fled from a certain way of being or a certain life or a certain circumstance. But we can be encouraged that our hope will bring us a refuge, safety, security if our hope is in Jesus. Knowing that Jesus is our forerunner, that he's gone before us to make a way into the inner place of God's presence is a great comfort. I know it is for me. I hope it is for you as well. The place where Jesus is can be the place where we are going to be, that closeness in God's presence for eternity. And Jesus has made a way by going before us to make a way for us to go there. And then right at the end of chapter 6, we get this reference back again to Jesus being a high priest in the same order of Melchizedek. And let's remember again, I know we've talked on this a lot, but who are these verses? Who is this really written for in that initial first context? It's written to people who are thinking of turning another way. People who were leaving the teaching and truth of Jesus behind, perhaps going back to their old Jewish ways or going another way entirely. And the author is reminding them that there is a greater high priest than Melchizedek, that their Jewish roots, they would know of who that person was, and that greater high priest is Jesus. He holds both the idea of being king and high priest together, and not only that, but he's also God. There is no one that has gone before him that is like him, and there is no one that will come again that will be like him. There is only one, Jesus, and he is the ultimate. He's the only one that could do what he did to enable us to have this way, the forerunner for us, to have a certainty of hope, to have relationship with God, to be co-heirs with him, and to give us a security for our future. Wow, what an encouragement that is. I want to encourage you to pause right now. Hopefully, you've read through these verses before I kind of gave my bit of explanation there. Or if you haven't, go read them right now. And then pause, have a pause, and think about what are the promises of God you are waiting on? Or what are the promises of God that you might have given up hope in or have stopped waiting for? Ask God to remind you again of his promises for you. Reminded again of the hope you have in him, a hope that comes with complete certainty, complete security that God can never lie to you, and that God will always do what he says he will. Be encouraged to keep running the race and keep running it with a certainty that God's promises will be fulfilled. God bless.